just get everything fired up. So welcome to those who have joined us so far. Last time we had about 21 people who dialed in. And so what we'll do now is we'll just get started. We'll make best use of time. And as we go through, if other people pop in, then we'll welcome them as they do so. So this actually is the first webinar of the series. So in our first call, it was kind of an introductory call where we had an opportunity to kind of introduce the topic a little bit. And so today we're gonna dig in into one of our, kind of a first set of topics for financial sustainability. Just as a reminder, this is designed to be an interactive session. If you feel comfortable, please do come off of mute so that you can share what you're thinking. And then in addition to that, either if your connection is not great or if you're not comfortable, then don't hesitate to use the chat function, because I do have the chat function running and I am keeping an eye on it as well. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to quickly do a share screen just to our presentation here, and just to have that handy for everybody. Now, every time I do this, I have to remind myself how to get the chat showing for myself. So give me a second. There it is. Great. I've got my chat. All right. Good stuff. Okay. Desktop organized, and we're good to go. So I'm actually going to leave the slides as open, as you can see with the slide sorter on the left-hand side. And the reason for that is because I am anticipating that we will have some questions go back and forth a little bit. The other thing is that I am going to also share with you guys some of the answers that some of you have actually brought to the first financial sustainability questions. So looking forward to kind of rolling through those as we go through. Great to see that Taklik is on the call. Yeah, and Vic, Shabir, fantastic. I'm glad to have you guys on as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to walk through a couple of things just to get things rolling. So just as a reminder, if you're not talking, just leave yourself on mute, just so we all don't hear any background noise. Definitely select the gallery view if you want to see people's faces. That, of course, all depends on people's connection. So if your connection is not strong, you can shut the video off for yourself. Type your questions into chat. I do have that chat up and running. And then just as a reminder, this is being recorded to the cloud. That's going to allow the Frontier Incubators team and yourselves to be able to access this recording, not only to follow up on some specific comments or conversation that we've had, but also so you can touch base with it and kind of dig into it at some point in time in the future, because this content will be available more on an enduring basis from the Frontier Incubator team. So just remind that. For any of you on your account, just to remind you, whenever you log into your account, you're going to have a name. So for example, Tamana, May, Vishnu, like most of you guys have your names kind of listed, which is fantastic. But if you do get an opportunity, then don't be shy to add your full name and also your organization name in your account profile, so we know who it is. So if you can do that. Last comment that I want to make is that Sana and Olivia both send their regrets. They're both unavailable at the moment. It's actually, Sana is still asleep because it's really early in the morning for her in Frankfurt. And Olivia is actually on a project meeting right now in Papua New Guinea. So, so just to give you guys a little bit of context for where everybody is. So I'm really excited to spend this time with you. for the agenda today, what I'd love to do is spend a little bit of time just chatting a little bit about where everybody is and some of the current status. So I do want to thank a couple of you for sending in the answers to the questions that I submitted. Thank you for that. The next process that we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about sales process. And in particular, what we're actually going to do is we're going to talk about how we as incubators and accelerators manage the process of engaging with, investors, corporates, donors, funders, governments to actually run a successful fundraising process. When we have worked with some of you before and in talking to some of the other organizations, we really saw an opportunity to spend today's financial sustainability session on the process. And as a part of that, we're actually going to use sponsorship as a case study. And then hopefully we can wrap with some discussion in the next steps. So really excited to dig into this as we go through. Again, if you guys have any questions or any comments or any asks, please do put them into the chat function. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with some of the answers. So just a quick reminder to everybody, I'm actually just going to slide over here for a second into the financial sustainability or fin-sustainability thread in the Frontier Incubators Network Slack. And so guys, this is where you want to be popping your questions, raising your concerns, putting them into this particular channel so that you can have them answered in a timely fashion. We don't have to wait necessarily for these particular webinars. But I did ask these 5 questions, right? So these 5 questions being, what is your primary source of funding? What do you think will be the biggest change in funding in 2019? What are your biggest concerns, or what's your biggest concern about sustainability for your organization? What do you think your market or community needs are? And then the last one, of course, is any specific asks. And so I do want to highlight a thank you to the KISS startup team and to the RISE team for giving us some answers to some of these initial questions. So excited to dig into those a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start with what the team at KISS shared. I think with both RISE and KISS, I think there's a lot of great information here. The KISS team, if you guys are interested, you can come off of Slack, or I can actually just describe the answers to the questions here. But I'm curious, sorry, not come off of Slack, but come off of mute. My apologies. But if you want to come off of mute and maybe share kind of what's here and what you're thinking, and if not, then I can definitely dive in as well. So. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just quickly dive into what has been shared here with KISS. And with KISS startups, primary source of revenue, they actually have a couple participation fees. So they actually charge their entrepreneurs for the program that they run, and it's $650 a month, and that is in US dollars. And then they also do take a success fee of no more than 1%, which is a sales-centric success fee. And so there's 2 ways for them to generate income for the program. And so the second piece is adding sponsorship to the current source of funding. And you have your first potential corporate sponsor being a Vietnamese bank, which is fantastic. And then we have Food Alpha, corporate training, public training, one-on-one coaching for short-term financing. So it sounds like with KISS, you guys have a few kind of shorter term things that you do as a matter of necessity in order to make yourself financially sustainable. And then the last piece here, you're starting to see corporates investing a little bit more in your key space, which is agriculture and agri-tech. And so you see an opportunity there, banks being one very obvious example of that. Difficult to access. So we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about difficulty to access today. So I'm glad that you raised this as one of the key topics for yourself. So that's fantastic. Great sharing. Thank you very much. KISS. For Rise, Vishnu, thank you for sharing your comments as well. So I'm going to start off at the top here. Primary source of funding, government funding. You have some project management fees, workshop facilitation fees. So you have three main sources of funding that are driving that. Vishnu, if you could in chat, let us know what the #1 source of funding is of the three. Be great to know, and for people on this thread to know which one is kind of the primary source of funding, and the other two being kind of secondary or second and third. So Vishnu, if you could do that, that'd be great. Just pop it into chat. And then I'm just going to pause here for a second. KISS, like to point to question #3. The concerns include market education effort, the conflict between long-term investment and short-term financing resources, early adopters, one success case study. Fantastic. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit for sure. Thank you. I'll come back to that once I finish reviewing what Rise has shared. What do you think will be the biggest change in funding? So Vishnu, thank you. Government funding #1. Yeah, consistent. I'm not surprised that that's the #1 source of funding for you. Makes a lot of sense. And then project management fees, run different projects, social innovation lab. So what's interesting for me, Vishnu, is that someone is paying you to develop an innovation program. And so what I'm curious about for that social innovation program, Vishnu, is that a corporate that paid you or is it someone else? So just to give people a bit of a sense as to where that social innovation lab and also the fellowship program for health system change, were those governments that paid you or were they corporates? Would be great. And then workshop facilitation fee, thank you. What will be the biggest change? Focus on longer term, bigger scale projects, partner with other organizations to achieve a bigger scale project. Yeah, great. Biggest concerns, consistent cash flow, generating revenue from other projects that have been funded. So this is a great question. Can we find any other revenue stream out of the incubation program? So as I understand that question, Vishnu, what you're saying is we have a core set of funding for a program, but can we add additional sources of funding on top of that? And so, yeah, let's definitely make sure that we chat through that a little bit. I'm just going to make a quick note on that. Thank you. Yeah, great. Thanks, Vishnu. And what do you think your market community needs will be? And so let me see here. CSR. Yeah, good that you highlight the CSR piece. One of the questions I think for everybody to explore in your local markets as you think about financial sustainability is with CSR or corporate social responsibility, what percentage of companies in your local market care about CSR that are regional or global businesses versus national businesses, right? So what percentage of corporates are global versus regional versus local? So that as you start to think about approaching them, you can start to divide the market and focus your energies where you believe that the greatest opportunity exists for CSR based funding. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, actually. when we get into the sales process or the funding process. And then any specific asks. So how to balance the current workload, revenue, and manpower, when to hire. Should we hire an employee and look at his investment even though we can make a loss at first? So I'm going to actually start there out of these questions. And so for everyone on this call, as a starting point, the questions that are asked here, first and foremost, how to balance current workload, revenue, and manpower, when to hire. Those are questions that really are fantastic in your individual projects. So working with the partner organization that is driving, your specific project within Frontier Incubators, that question of like balancing workload, revenue, manpower is a fantastic question to bring into the specific project that you have. And so with the Rise team, and we're very thankful to be supporting Rise as a part of their project, that's a question you want to bring to that, kind of that process, because it not only impacts financial sustainability, it impacts internal operations, it impacts your revenue mix, it impacts how you do team culture, acquiring talent. So it's kind of a broad-based question and really deserves its own dedicated time. That said, the second question, hire an employee and look at it as investment, even though you make a loss at first, that is a very strategic question. And it does impact, that kind of question does impact financial sustainability. Because anytime you hire an employee before you have supporting funding, you are drawing down on your expenses, or through your expenses, you're drawing down on your cash flow, I should say. And in drawing down on your cash flow, you're shortening your runway, right? You're shortening the window of financial viability. And so if you are going to hire someone in advance, you need to have a lot of confidence that you're going to be able to fund that person. The second thing is that it will drive you towards making funding decisions that are about covering costs, which sometimes will cause you to broaden or widen the types of projects that you will take on, so you can ensure that you're funding that role. So the important part of taking someone in first, so investing in a person, believing that you can generate the revenue later, is really a combination of a couple of things. One is, how much cash and how much do you have in the bank to allow you to do it? So how much confidence that you have in the runway. And the second thing is, what is your concerns, or what is the risk on mission creep or scope creep? So in other words, if you have somebody and you have to pay for them, does it cause you to take a project or a program on that you really would otherwise not do? Whether that is because of the nature of the the nature of the funder, or the nature of the work itself. So it's really important to think about those two things. I'm just going to quickly type that in the chat. So two key considerations are going to be length of the runway. So in other words, your cash flow. And then the second piece is going to be risk of scope creep or mission creep. So for example, I know an organization in Latin America who had a fairly big staff early. And so it actually caused them to take on a project, which happened to be with an alcohol company. And according to their mission and vision and values, they otherwise would not have worked with that alcohol company. But they ended up having to do so because they had taken on this investment early. So it's just important to think about those two key considerations. So fantastic question, Visnu, and thank you for asking it. I'm going to touch on the other sources or additional sources of revenue in the core presentation that I have. And then the second thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop back to KISS. So the three concerns, so under concerns here, is that you say market education effort, the conflict between long-term investment and short-term financing resources, early adopters, and one success case study. So many of you may be feeling this challenge, and this challenge being that you are still early in the market, all things considered. And the second thing is that, you know, the innovation ecosystem and the entrepreneur ecosystem is also early in your market. So KISS Startups, relatively young organization, as we all are. And in addition to that, there's a real sense that, you know, supporting innovation in the ecosystem is still a newer idea. And so it is important for everybody to note that we do live in this tension of how do we balance our long-term objectives with our short-term needs and cash flow? And generally speaking, what we have found at Spring is it's usually 3 to 4 years of really trying to balance that tension before you start to settle into a real rhythm around consistently funding for the long term. And sometimes that can stretch to 5 years. So my comment to you is, if you guys have been at it for less than 4 years, you know, remember, you're not alone. You're all feeling this tension. And so our goal is to find ways to create a more diverse set of funding sources that do a couple of things. One is diversity that is consistent with our goals and objectives, that everything that we're doing for funding supports our core efforts, it supports our core skill set, and it allows us to remain focused on what we're good at and how we're trying to create our impact. And in addition to that, another key component to this is, where can we replicate the work? So in other words, if I use RISE, for example, the innovation lab, right? If RISE can replicate, if they can repeat that innovation lab over and over again, then again, that allows for a little bit more of a long-term focus on sustainability, because you're creating core capability that you can repeat over and over and over again. So these are, I think, a couple of key pieces that you want to keep in mind as you go through. So I just want to touch on those questions early. So my comment to everybody on this call is, please keep the questions coming in chat because we can go through all of them. The second thing, as a reminder, this session is being recorded. So Sana and Olivia, who are not here, will be able to refer to them, and they'll be able to provide additional answers later in Slack or directly to you. And we can keep sort of the process going. So just keep those questions rolling. So what I'm actually going to do is I am going to pop back into the presentation for a minute. And again, thanks everybody for providing some initial commentary on the questions that I asked. For the rest of you who have not yet answered the questions in Slack, please take the time to do that this week. The more that you guys share with us and the more that you ask, then the more we can, you know, kind of provide support. The last thing I would say to that is, if you guys have any concerns that what you're sharing needs to be private, then what you can do is you can send a direct message to myself, Sana, and Liv. And what we can do is we can answer your question, but then we can also confirm if it should remain private or if it's actually a great opportunity to share it with everybody else so we can all increase our learning. And we'll always make sure that you're comfortable with that in advance. So yeah, so we'll just go from there. I've just realized, everybody, that I accidentally sent a reply. Let me see if I can do this. Great. I accidentally sent a private reply on my comments about the two key considerations for RISE and Visnu for your question about, do we invest by hiring somebody before we have the revenue, or do we wait until after? One thing that we do at Spring, just for everybody to know, is that with the teams, we actually do two things. One is we're constantly meeting and interviewing people who could be potential future members of the spring team, so that if we do have a new project that comes up, then we have the ability to bring somebody on board. And then the second thing that you can do is you can also look at when you hire somebody on contract for a specific project, when it's one versus hiring somebody as an employee. So if you have an individual project, you don't know if it's going to be continuous, then you may consider hiring somebody on a contract first until you actually have confidence that there will be ongoing revenue. And then what you can do is you can convert them to an employee. So keep that in mind as you go through. And Vishnu, you're welcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to dive now into the topic of this process that we're going through of raising funding. And so for those who were on the call a week ago, we actually covered a broad base of topics. So we covered everything from corporate innovation to sponsors to donors and funders. We talked about space and events. We literally covered every single possible source of income that all of us can generate. And so what I want to do is I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the main process by which we raise money for our organization, and give you guys some confidence in that process so that as you engage sponsors, donors, funders, and other sort of supporting organizations, that you do it not only with confidence, but you actually do it in a way that empowers you to increase the probability of success. So it is important to note that as you go through a conversation, and by the way, this is with a donor, a funder, a government, a corporation, whatever those organizations are, you really do have a choice. And the choice is one of these two. So either you give them what you have, so in other words, you ask them to support what you're doing, or you give them what they want. And I'm going to explain a little bit. So give them what you have is where you have a pre-existing program or project, or program that you have decided that you want to do. And what you do is you approach the organization and you say, this is what I've got, and see if they're interested in actually supporting it. So it's a very direct approach where you say, here's the package, here's the program, this is what it looks like, duration, funding amount, who's it for, what are the objective outcomes, etc. And the benefit for you is it allows you to be laser focused on exactly what you want to do and nothing else. The downside or the cons of doing this is that you actually, in going in, you don't know what they want. And if you pitch what you have, they may not want it. And so you don't actually know if they care about what it is that you're doing. And so that said, sometimes people trust you, you have a pre-existing relationship with them, they really value what you're doing. And so it's an opportunity for you to dig in and kind of have them just support what you're doing. However, often that doesn't work. And the reason for that, of course, is because it doesn't align with what they are looking for. So the other approach that you have is to give them what they want. And the benefit of doing this, of course, is that it ensures that it's aligned with their goals and also with the funding that they have. But at the same time, it may not be what you want to do. It also may not be aligned with what you're good at. And it may not be aligned with your vision, values, and goals. And this is kind of a scenario where you would go in and you would, kind of talk to them as an organization about all their wants and needs and objectives and budget. And then you just kind of react to that and give them a proposal for what it is. Um, yeah, so Tamana, thank you for sharing. So everybody in chat, Toru, um, throughout all the conversations we've had with funders, donors, and partners, we've experienced that most of them know what they want, and we need to figure out if they and we align. Exactly, exactly. Um, the vast majority of organizations know what they want. Now, I will share with you that sometimes you'll see a difference between them. So step one, with donors and foundations, they often have a mandate, which is a 3 to 5 year mandate. So they have like a 3 to 5 year vision with a 3 to 5 year set of objectives. And so that mandate kind of exists for that entire duration of time. With government and with corporates, sometimes the mandate is only for the next year. And so if you're working with a corporate or sometimes with a government, sometimes what you need to do is reaffirm the mandate every single year and then find out if they align. So Tamana, yeah, fantastic sharing. And you're kind of really taking this approach, which is kind of the combination of the two things that I shared. And that is, we're trying to find that right spot in the middle where we know what we're great at. We know our vision and values. What we need to do is we need to find out what their goals are, what their mandate is, what their vision and values are, and then see if they line up and find that right spot. And really a critical outcome of this is there are absolutely times where we will say no, where it does not fit, doesn't fit our skill set, doesn't fit our vision and values. It's okay to say no, because what it actually does is it frees us up to say yes to the things that we are good at and that is values aligned. So Tamana, I'm curious if you at Toru have actually said no to donors, partners, or funders because they weren't aligned. And so, yeah, so if you can, so you have. So my question for you is, how did it feel when you actually said no? Like, were you nervous about, were you nervous about saying no to money, or did it feel good and allow you to be focused? So I'm curious, Tamana, how you guys felt about saying no. And I'll give you a second to type that in, your answer to my question. Great. Okay. So, yeah, thank you. So, Tamana, it sounds like you're really committed to your path and committed to the process and the method that you believe is the right one to use. And so that's fantastic. It's a really good example, I think, for all of us, because you saying no to those 3 or 5 day short things allows you to say yes to the things that you're really good at. Yeah, it's fantastic. One thing that's so important for all of us is that we just have to remember that no is our friend, right? When we are working with our entrepreneurs and we talk to them about target marketing, right? We talk to our entrepreneurs about who their ideal customer is. What is that market segment and how do they serve it and how do they stay focused? What we need to remember is we need to apply that exact same logic into our organizations. And so Tamana has given us a fantastic example of that. I would say, actually, based on my limited knowledge anyways of this group so far, I would say KISS Startups has also done a really fantastic job of that by staying kind of true to that kind of food retail, agriculture, agri-tech focus, and not really wandering away from that, because that's what KISS is fantastic at. And in a short period of time, I think KISS has done a good job of staying focused. You know, we're about 35 minutes in on this webinar. And one thing that I do want to remind everybody is that if you are comfortable coming off of mute, would love to hear your voice, and would love to have you share openly. So please don't hesitate to do that. If you think you need a little bit of space to talk, also don't be shy to go into chat and just say, hey, Keith, I'd like to come off of mute. And then we can have you come off of mute. So for the remainder of this call, and then for all calls going forward, I will be pausing on a regular basis just to see if anybody wants to come off of mute to share. So I'm going to refer to Tamana's comment here. And that is, in one of the cases, we were able to get through to the partner with our vision, and they have migrated into, oh, okay, so fantastic. Another good example. And Tamana has just shared that, you know, you actually were able to convince someone to move. If you remember, Tamana, and again, you can come off of mute and share this, or you can put it into chat. How long did it take you to get them to migrate over? About a year. Fantastic. Yeah, that's pretty consistent with what we see as well at Spring. And so it's, you know, for all of us on this call, I want to highlight two things based on what Tamana just shared. One is, you know, you can have people shift to be aligned to what you do and how you do it. And so you never want to necessarily give up on somebody. You want to keep them in the loop and keep the communication going. And manage that funnel, right? That funnel of opportunity where you first meet them, but then you kind of, you know, get them a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and they'll either eventually say no, or they'll say yes, as is in the case of Toru. But in addition to that, what I do want to highlight is that you just have to be patient sometimes. And this is going back to the KISS startups comment about, like, you know, balancing between long-term objectives and short-term needs, right? And so it's really important to do that. And agreed, Tamana, it does take some relationship building. So before I continue into this next section, which is the where do you start section, I just want to see if anybody's willing to take the leap and come off of mute and just share what you're thinking about this part of financial sustainability and finding that right blend between what you have to offer and what the funder is looking for. So maybe I'll pause here for now and just see if anybody wants to come off of mute and just share your thinking. It'll also give me a chance to have a drink. All right, great.
I'll just jump in super quickly. If that's
hey,
right.
Olivia.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
Hey, no worries. Glad you're here.
I'm not sure if this is exactly, because I know this isn't exactly what you mean, because it's more about the general kind of the kind of bigger picture stuff in terms of how you align. But we have a partner situation at the moment where we've got this great partner, and they're funding quite a majority of what we do. So they're quite key to our sustainability. And we are pretty aligned in the big picture stuff, but actually when it comes down to managing the funding that they've given us, or very small details, they really get involved a lot and kind of micromanage us a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it can really slow us down, because maybe they would like us to focus on details that we don't think is important, or spend money in particular ways that we don't think is really relevant to the startups, but they think that we should spend the money in that way. So it's kind of a different version of having a bit of difficulty with how you work with a funder. And this is actually a current problem that we're actually having even today, where we don't know who has the control really, because they're the ones giving us the money, but we're the ones running the program and working out how to strike the right balance and relationship. I mean, perhaps that's just better relationship building, but it's like we're not aligned in a different way. We're not aligned in more minute details of programs. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great. I'm going to ask you maybe a couple of clarifying questions. My first question is this the first project you've worked with them on?
No, we've worked with them for a few years, so it's kind of a recurring.
And have they consistently been like this, or is this a new thing?
It kind of ebbs and flows. So sometimes it's fine and they don't get very involved, and then for some elements of we do multiple programs with them, and so for some of them, yeah, they just get super involved and tell us how to do things, and we don't really agree, but then we don't know we don't really know how to push back, because we often end up kind of doing what they say, even if it's not really aligned with what we think is the right thing to do, which isn't great, but we're in it's a bit of a tough spot because they do fund so much of what we do. So, but I don't really like this power. I'm afraid that there'll be this odd power dynamic of when can we put our foot down and say, this isn't like, this is our project still, like we're still the ones that should be deciding what's best for the entrepreneurs and so on.
Yeah. I have one last question before we open it up for feedback from the group. And my last question for you is the person or persons, are they the same across all of this ebb and flow, or do you find it is an individual or a couple of people who are always micromanaging versus others?
I believe it's a couple, yeah, that we're working with most closely with on this project. So it's kind of a bit like operational, and then there's like the guy that's in charge of them. So their boss will sometimes swoop in and have the final say, for example.
Yep.
So actually there's probably 3 layers of management that we're involved with on this project, so that sometimes it gets escalated up to higher things, but the higher it gets escalated, the less power we have to really negotiate, let's say. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fantastic sharing. I noticed Tamana has already added a comment into chat that certainly Toru has experienced this. I would echo Tamana's comment. Spring has definitely also experienced this. I'm curious if other people, if anybody has any suggestions or ideas for Olivia on how she could tackle this. And you can either come off of mute, or if you want, I can kind of read what you put down in chat as well. So just wait for a second to see if anybody has any comments or suggestions for Olivia. Has anybody else experienced that, where you have had a funder who has been either overly detail-oriented, micromanaging, wanting to tell you how to do it, when in fact you already have a plan? Okay, no comments yet. I'm going to throw in some ideas here for Olivia. So it's a couple things. One thing that we have learned through the process is to insert a couple of steps, which you guys may be doing already, so acknowledging that. But a couple of things. First, we have an explicit project kickoff with the funder, where we map out specifically how everything's going to lay out and when. So like, what is the schedule going to look like? What are the deliverables going to look like? How is this going to play out? Who are the players involved? Staff members, etc. We talk a little bit about methodology. So we try and make sure that we really are very clear up front. The second thing that we do is we also try and identify at the beginning how we're going to do conflict resolution. So we actually, before any of this tension starts, we actually say, okay, project kickoff, what are we going to do if, there's this, disagreement or this tension for how either something's going to happen or by when or how the money is being spent. So we actually have a discussion up front about how we're going to manage that conflict, such that if we do have a conflict, we can refer back to it. There's kind of like an agreed to process. And then the last thing that we do is we have regular touch point meetings. So we kind of proactively try and engage the client so that they don't start to overthink things on their own and then suddenly, decide to try and kind of mess around with what we're doing. So those are probably the three things. One is a hard project kickoff. One is mutual agreement on conflict resolution or tension resolution. The third one is proactive regular updates. So those are the three things that we do. Junaid, do you want to come off of mute to share your experience? Would love to have you do that.
So hi, how are you doing?
Good. Great to hear your voice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Hi.
Okay. So yeah, bit of a lag there. So essentially, this was with one of the startups that I worked on, which was working with low-income farmers and basically getting the market access. And I wouldn't want to name the donor agency, but we were in an active pursuit trying to get them to fund the project. And soon into the whole thing, we kind of realized that the misalignment of our business goals with their own objectives, their KPIs, was really deep, which we didn't realize early on. So it came to a point where we realized that this will actually be detrimental to our growth, because there was a number of farmers. I mean, their checklist was more about, more of a linear growth of this many farmers, this many months. And we were like, okay, we have to really experiment and figure things out before, the whole J hockey stick kind of a thing takes off. So eventually then after long, negotiation and everything, we decided not to go with that. So it was, I think at the start, it was very tempting to, hold on to any string of funding. You can get any last straw, you try to hold on to it. But I think you have to make that call where, if it is actually going to be detrimental because you'll be spreading yourself out too thin or you don't have the resources, you are just better off, staying away from any of that. So that was just a small experience. And I think that translates even into the incubation space as well. So I feel if your core goals and objectives are different, if you're constantly going to be realigning yourself for the funding, you'll run into a bit of a mess eventually, where you will lose that core identity. To really be able to, specialize in something. You'll just be all over the place. So yeah.
Yeah. Hey, fantastic sharing. I certainly, I can echo that. Spring has been in a similar situation where we have had a relationship with a funder where, initially it looked like there was great fit, but then actually once we started working together, it was actually not a fit. In our case, it happened to be with a corporate client. And so, yeah, we did end up similar to you. We had to have a conversation to say, hey, is this actually going to work or not? And so really important to dig into, and kind of pause, and hit stop for a minute and actually talk about it and make sense. Olivia, maybe one last comment that I would share with you, which is, with your particular situation, you did mention that you have worked with this organization multiple times. And I just wonder if, as a part of your situation, there is a little bit of familiarity that is coming into play here, where you guys have worked together before on past projects. And so maybe, the notion of being two separate organizations, maybe that's starting to blend, like it's starting to blur. And maybe this person at this organization is starting to think about you guys as being, somebody that they can just kind of tell what to do, as opposed to you guys being partners in this process. And so maybe thinking a little bit about how you manage the meetings and the communication flow to ensure that there's a sense of balance and parity in these conversations, so that they know they can't just kind of tell you what to do, but they need to kind of, you know, work with you on the solution. So yeah, that's an additional comment on my end. Now I just noticed that somebody has come online with, and it's called iPhone. So welcome iPhone. I don't know who you are. Maybe you can tell us who you are on this call, just to make sure that.
It's me. Sorry, it's me. It's Hian. My laptop stopped, so I use my phone to connect in. Sorry, it's Hian from Wise.
Hey, how you doing?
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'm glad you're on. If you obviously, Hian, if you have any comments to share, just come on off of mute anytime. Anybody else have anything that they want to share? Any challenges that you have faced balancing, you know, pitching to people what you have versus, you know, kind of listening to what they want and trying to find that balance between the two? Any last sharing before we move on? Okay, great. Again, feel free to come off of mute anytime and just pipe up. And then the other one, of course, is keep continuing to use chat anytime you have anything to share. So Olivia and Junaid, thanks a lot for sharing your 2 comments. Amazing. So I'm going to touch on a few things, and this is going to tie, actually, interestingly enough, right into what Tamana shared. And so first things first, we want to find out the why. So every time we speak to a funder, right, like donor, funder, government, corporate, other strategic partner, we need to find out, why are they driven to do whatever it is that they're looking for, or why are they driven to support us? Why do they have to innovate? Why do they have to innovate in this way? Why do they have to innovate in this category? How are they motivated? So for example, is it the CEO of an organization and this is their personal passion? Or is this like a manager or director who's just been told to do it, right? So what are the motivations? Like, what's kind of underpinning this discussion? And then of course, the last question is how are they staffed and equipped? So can they be supportive? Can they actually deliver their part of this relationship, whatever that may be? So an important part in this process is to really think about, how do we shape the conversation such that we can get to a positive outcome? And so our recommendation is always, like, don't go in pitching right away. Don't go in just saying, this is what we got, this is what we want to do. What we want to do is always start by painting the vision and getting them excited. You know, Tamana, my guess is that Toru's experience with that one partner had a lot to do with this, that they were willing to shift their approach because they, at the end of the day, believed in what Toru represents and what you stand for and what you deliver. So for all of us, we want to paint our vision right away to get them excited. We want to learn about them and, of course, their plans and objectives, their goals, their budgets. We want to find out what they like and don't like. So for example, Olivia might be in a situation where they just like to micromanage. They just like to be active, really active in the process. Spring has a funder that is exactly that. They love to be active. And so, you know, we created those steps in the process that I described earlier, Olivia, to help us to manage a very active client. We have other clients who literally, we sit down with them once a year, they write us a check, we never hear from them. You know, the very definition of passive. And then of course you want to discuss your plans. Like, what are you planning on doing, right? Like, what are your goals and objectives for the year? And then see how they align and overlap with what they're doing. And so we at Spring have actually had situations where people have told us what they're doing, as a corporate or as a donor, as a funder, and then we've said to them, well, this is what we have planned, and there's no fit. Like there's just not. In the first meeting, you kind of know it's not a fit. And so often what we'll do is when we find a good organization that with good people and their heart's in the right place, but it's just not a fit with us, we'll gladly refer them to other people who are probably better aligned. And then of course, what we want to do is agree on next steps. And so the other thing that I would encourage you guys to think about, and I'm sure some of you do this already, is just remember that people want choice, right? Like human nature is people love to choose. They don't want to feel that they don't have any choice. And so the important part is whenever we go into these meetings, whenever we have these conversations, we want to go in with at least a couple of choices and a couple of options that we can put in front of donors and funders, so that if they're open-minded, if they do, as an organization, have multiple objectives, that we can put multiple programs in front of them so that they can choose, right? And so that's a really important part. So I'm just going to refer over to the chat. Tamana made a comment here. Our partner liked the bigger picture we painted for them. They were able to foresee the change, which was imperative. Sometimes just using words aligned to their vision can help them to get excited. You're just rephrasing your idea in a way that they want to hear it. Another way to put that, Tamana, is you are coming to a place where you're kind of helping them to believe that it's their idea, right? That they're like, wow, that is my vision. And if we do it that way, then we realize my vision. So I guess that's kind of my idea, right? Like, and so, so I do think that, being excellent listeners is really an important part of this process, and giving people choice. Lastly, being patient. And so those, I think, are some key points. So thank you for sharing that. Next thing I want to touch on just very quickly is the process. But maybe actually before I go, anybody have any good examples of where you actually gave choice to a funder? Like it could be corporate, could be donor, could be sponsor, could be government. Anybody have any examples of giving someone choice where that you could say, I can do this, or we can do this, or we are going to do this, or we are going to do that, and how giving them choice helped you to get them to fund you? And if you want to come off of mute, please do. Or if you want to just type it in the chat, that's also fine. So any examples of giving choice that helped you to succeed with a funder?
Hi again, it's me.
Hey, Olivia.
Yeah, we've done that quite a couple of times recently, particularly with funders who have a lot of trust in us already. So they are potentially semi-secured in the sense that they really understand what we're doing. And so they're sold on the kind of big picture of who we are. But for example, with a funder recently, yeah, we gave them the option of fund one of our online courses, fund our innovation garage, or fund an accelerator program. And we gave them the choice, and we said, okay, for sure, this one we're going to do anyway. These ones we need money for to do them, and they chose to fund the innovation garage, and it was like a little shopping list that they can choose from. Mm-hmm. And we also did that similar thing last year with a company we'd worked with already. And we gave them the option as well of, I think, an online course or an event series, and they went with the online course. So yeah, I mean, I would say that my experience of that has generally always been with people who really understand us and know us quite well already. They're quite happy to have a few options. People who maybe approach us for the first time are more, maybe they already have something in their mind, or they've seen a particular thing that we're doing, and then they really want to work with us on that specific thing. Yeah, that's probably my experience.
Yeah, fantastic. Great example. if anybody else wants to come off of mute, please do. Avery shared that same comment, menu of options in proposals. And I actually like your comment there, Avery, where you say that you also select not only different program options, but actually funding levels within a program. And so, yeah, great example. I don't know if you want to comment further.
Keith, yeah, I guess to share a little bit more about that, we're always shocked. There's sometimes clients who, we put in some add-ons where it's kind of like, oh, there's no way that they're going to approve that kind of extra budget. And then we walk around and they just don't bat an eye. They're like, oh, yes, of course, we want all of that. Go do that. And then others who we think they have a lot more budget and they actually come back and say, actually, we can only do kind of this minimal first engagement as a way to get to know each other. And so by having that menu of options, you just keep it open so that you don't scare them off by a number that's too high or too low, especially if in your discovery process you're not able to uncover what their working budget is, which is always, I think, the preferable option is understanding what budget they're working in up front. But if you can't get that, the menu of options is really helpful.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because like you say, sometimes we can't predict their budget. More importantly, sometimes too, we can't predict what they get excited about. And so that idea of, definitely put a budget option up that's higher than you might normally expect to see where that excitement level is. And the important part about giving people choice is if you give them one option, there are only two answers. It's either yes or no, right? And so our goal, through this process is to have them say yes, and it's either yes and or yes but, right? And so, Avery's example just now where it's like, yes, but, maybe we can only afford this kind of minimal starting point. Great. That's still a yes. Or it's yes, and we love all these extra things. Let's go do that. So our goal here is to take no and set it off to the side and have no as an answer be more about differences in vision or values or focus areas as opposed to the programs themselves. So thanks for sharing that. That was great. Tamana, similar process, 3 options: year-long program, 6-month program, and then a continuous program. Donor chose to collaborate with us for all 3 programs, but at different capacities. Great. Yeah, another example is you have to sometimes put all of the options on the table to find out what people are most excited about. And sometimes you'll surprise them in ways, or they'll surprise you in ways that you didn't expect. We actually had a situation happen recently where we were at Spring working with a bank, and one of the programs that we're working on in 2019 is innovation programs in rural communities, but in particular, not just an individual community, but actually how to create an interconnected network of rural communities that can amplify their impact by doing this sort of interconnected network. And so the original pilot is in a certain region of Canada. And so when we were speaking with this bank, we were telling them about everything, and we did include a sharing about this program, but it was just making sure they kind of knew everything we were doing, because we actually knew that the bank actually does not even work in that geography. Like, they're not there. We shared the program, and all of a sudden the bank sat up and they're like, "Are you working in that region?" We said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, actually, it's confidential right now, but we're going to be launching in that new region in 2019. And this program would be a perfect way for us to do that." So it was actually, kind of serendipity. It was a great scenario for us to share something and just make sure they knew the options and let them pick. So Tamana, thank you for sharing that as well. Fantastic. Any other examples that anybody wants to share about providing choice? And if not, we'll dive into the next topic. Cool. Okay, we'll keep on rolling. So what is the process? I just want to touch on and give you guys our example. And I'd love to hear your examples as well. So just to highlight a couple of things, it's kind of a 10-step process that we use at Spring. So the first thing is, we kind of look at the program or programs that we're working on, and we talk about what type of business best suits the program. Now, when I use the term business, I do mean government, donor, foundation, corporate, right? Like it could be any of the above. We think about these options, this sort of menu of options that we can offer. How can we get them involved in what way? And we start to think conceptually about price points, but just conceptually at this point. So through that process, we then know what we have to offer a sponsor, whether that is a donor sponsor, a corporate sponsor, or anything else. The next thing we do is we reach out to build the relationship. And so I want to circle back to a comment that KISS Startups made at the start of this session, where they said, sometimes it's hard to access people. And so the acknowledgement that I want to make is that's absolutely true. It is hard to access. And in particular, it's sometimes hard to access the right people. And so we at Spring, we definitely take what I would call a sales process approach. So in other words, we look to identify the people that we think are well suited for a program. And through that process, we then, we start to reach out, we call people. But we're very quick to say, like, this is who we are, this is what we're doing. We thought you may be the right person to talk to, but if not, can you recommend to us the right person to talk to? And so whether or not we can identify a CSR person or possibly the CEO, or maybe somebody on the talent team, like whoever it may be, we're just, as we like to say, smile and dial, right? Like we just like to start to call people and find. So it's important to note that step 4 is probably one of the more challenging processes in this exercise. And for us, I think it is really important to remind ourselves that we have to persevere, right? We have to push to make sure that we talk to the right people. Once we start talking to them, we just chatted through this process of getting to know donors' objectives and goals. So the important part as well in this process is to know who the decision makers really are. Because as we start to get to know individuals within an organization, we need to find out who's a decision maker, who influences, who's a gatekeeper, right? So who can block kind of a project from happening. Also, who owns the budget, right? So if you remember Avery's comment where she said, ideally we know what the budget is. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But the other key piece is who owns the budget? Is it the CEO who owns it? Is it the CSR team? Like, who owns the budget? So it's really important for us to make sure that we understand all of the relationships that exist within an organization. And so if any of you are kind of asking the question, Keith, I understand what you're saying, but it sounds complicated. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to highlight something to you in Slack. And so it's called the Miller-Hyman Blue Sheet. So Miller-Hyman is an organization that has developed a wide-ranging and deep set of knowledge and expertise on strategic selling, which is what we're all talking about here. And so anytime there is an exchange of value, so your program in exchange for funding, that is a strategic sale. And so the important part in this process is to say, if you need structure, the Miller-Hyman blue sheet, and if you Google that term, you'll see templates, is a way for you to identify who these different stakeholders are, like who's the decision maker, who owns the budget, right? Who has influence. And it helps you to kind of manage this conversation so you don't lose focus and you don't lose track of all the players that are involved in making a decision. So feel free to look that up. It's a fantastic tool to use. And if you have any questions on it, don't hesitate to just pop me a quick ask in Slack in the financial sustainability channel. And then what I can do is when I answer, then everybody can kind of see that. And so once you kind of know who the decision makers are and what their objectives are, then the goal is to find out when to pitch. It might be tied to a timeline, like the call for proposals, or it's just, you know, that right feel for when it's the right time to put a proposal in front of them. Make sure you put the right offer together based on that, and really finding that common ground that we talked about earlier on. Another key point we consistently find when it comes in particular to corporates, sometimes with governments, that adding employee engagement, either government employees or corporate employees, adding their engagement into the proposal sometimes really helps. So for example, we work with a national accounting firm in Canada, and as a part of the proposal, we actually put in a line item where any staff member from the accounting firm is able to sit in and audit any of the workshops related to any of the programs. So they can sit in anytime. And so it's a really powerful way for them to feel engaged in the process. And just remember always to make your proposal very specific and relevant to what you kind of talked about earlier. So it's kind of this 10-step process that we use at Spring to manage this relationship from kind of our initial planning right through to agreement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here and just see if there's any questions, any comments that you guys may have on this process. If you want to come off of mute and share how you guys do it, I'd love to hear it. Or you can type it in the chat. So happy to hear your thoughts. Think I've missed anything? You guys think we're crazy? Too structured? So far, so good. Quick reminder for you guys, as we're going through this, that this session is being recorded, so you can refer back to it. You guys are also getting a copy of all of these presentations. Tamana, best comment of the day. Yeah, it is the right amount of crazy. Awesome. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling then. A quick time check for everybody. We have about 15 minutes left on this call. We will respect everybody's time. We'll wrap on time. If you have follow-on questions, and I'm really hoping you guys do, please do throw them in the Slack anytime. I am actually going to highlight one other thing. Sorry, I'm just putting it into the chat right now. So I know Hien knows this. All right. So I just typed in my WhatsApp, so Canadian phone number, and I'm on WhatsApp. And so if you guys have a question or comment or concern outside of these webinars and seminars, please do throw them into Slack. But if you have anything urgent that comes up, just send me a WhatsApp. If I'm sleeping, I'll catch you as soon as I wake up. But if I'm awake, just know that if you send me a WhatsApp, I will reply right away, and we'll set up a time to chat, and we'll deal with whatever it is. No issue is too big or small. So just have that as a standing offer if you guys have anything urgent that comes up at any point in time. Cool. I'm just going to keep going. how long does it take to build these relationships? So I'm going to give you guys my perspective, and I'm curious of everybody else's perspective. It does take time to build a relationship. For us at Spring, it's literally anywhere from 1 month to 2 years to get a first partnership agreement in place. And I would say that the reasons for shorter or longer is, do we have a pre-existing relationship in some way? Were they referred to us? Is there direct and immediate alignment? Do they have budget to spend right now? Are they a conservative organization? Have they ever done this before? Right? Like, so these are some of the factors that can pop in. So, you know, we definitely have had people who have come to the table very, very quickly at Spring, and others that have taken time. We actually just signed a partnership with a funder. It happened to be a foundation. It literally took us 2 years to get to that first agreement, but it was worth it because they're a fantastic strategic partner for us. Ken, you asked the question, what percentage of time do you divide amongst seeking funding and running your programs? This will depend on how big your team is and how early on in the process. What I would love actually is for all of you to actually share, either come off of mute and share, or share in chat. Spring as an organization right now, you know, probably half of my time as, like, in my role as CEO, probably half of my time is spent on building relationships for funding. That's probably, and then of the remaining time, I would probably say about a quarter of my time is on team, and then a quarter of my time is on delivery. So that's me. Now, my organization is 5 years old. I do have 6 full-time people on my team, plus a couple of contractors. So that gives you a bit of context for, you know, size of team and stage. But I'm curious for everybody else, like, where are you guys at? How much time do you spend on raising money versus running programs? And, you know, come off of mute or just share it in chat. I'd love to hear it. Yeah, you bet, Ian. No problem. Anybody want to share? Pop it in the chat. How much time you spend seeking funding?
Well, in my case, it's here. In my case, we are just 2 years, 2 years old organization, and for this year, I found that my time has been spent much more on seeking funding. But the downside of it is that really I have a smaller team than yours. I just have 2 full-time people.
Yep.
So that's why, you know, when we get funding, when I start going out seeking funding, and when the fund comes, it's really putting pressure on the team of delivery. So that's why we need to balance between seeking funding and operation, building the team. Because the funding, when it comes, there might be multiple funds come at the same time, but the size of funding is not too much to get a new person in the team. So the challenge then would be really how to deliver the programs at the same time with limited number of people. So that's the wise case.
Yeah, you know what? So thanks for sharing that, Hien. Tamana, thank you for sharing that you guys do it simultaneously by having separate teams dedicated to programs and fundraising. So I'm curious how big your team is. So Hien, part of the process that you're going through, and I'm curious if other people are going through the same thing, is you have a very small team. How do you find the time to do both when it's very small? And so to give you guys some context, when Spring started, we were also just 2 people. So how did you find the time? And so I'm going to leap ahead to another slide. Yeah, so Toru has 10 people, Tamana and the founder, working on fundraising. So I think great inspiration for some of you who are earlier along to see where you can get to in terms of that, you know, kind of team structure and the ability to focus on funding. But one thing that you can do, Kian, is try and automate the process to at least a certain degree. And so one of the things that we have done, and I know, sorry, I'm just going to do a quick fix on a typo here. One of the things that you can do is make sure that you have, for lack of a better term, an insider email where you actually send updates to prospective and current funders about what's going on in your organization. So your opportunity to share your vision, upcoming programs, program updates, status, share stories, right? Organization stories, alumni stories, wins. And generally speaking, I think for us is that it's about, making sure that it comes from like a senior person within the organization, because it actually helps to save you time, because then when you actually talk to a prospective funder or donor, you actually don't need to repeat and kind of get them caught up on everything you've been doing, because they've been reading the emails. And then what you can do is when you meet, you can actually just really zero in and focus in on, what you're about to do, what your program needs are, funding opportunities, and they can also respond back proactively with, oh, Hien, I just read your email about this upcoming program, and that actually sounds like a fit for us. We should talk. The second thing that we love to do is we love to run this annual event, which we usually do during a holiday season. So in your case, I would probably recommend that it would happen just before the TED holiday, or possibly just after, like now, where you actually celebrate the past year, share your vision, share what's coming up, and invite them to buy into what you're doing. And so I think that that's a really effective tool. And for us at Spring, it's been actually a fantastic tool for us to use. Sil, thank you for sharing. So Team Sil, I'm going to say Serene. I hope I'm saying that properly. So fundraising is a constant for us. The senior management is always chasing funders, and then we have team leads to manage operations. So yes, as you mature, as you get a little bit farther along, I think Hien and everybody else, you're seeing this trend, right? Toru, Sil, Spring, people who are pretty heavily, if not completely, dedicated on fundraising. And the reason is because you're constantly building new relationships, identifying new opportunities, also looking for those places where you can add additional funding on top, which is one of the questions that Visnu added earlier, which I'm actually just about to talk to. So I'm actually going to circle back just for a second, or actually I'll pop ahead here for a minute. I'm actually going to use a case study on sponsors to answer Visnu's question about can we add and how can we add more funding on top of a project. And that one of the most effective ways, but you can definitely do this with multiple donors and funders, but often the fastest way to do it is to actually take a donor or funder and then add to it with corporates. And corporates, they love to sponsor programs, workshops, and events. Those are the things that they love to do. And they do it because they want to, support their vision, but they also value your entrepreneurs as potential clients. I've given a few examples here. Sorry, let me just pop that back just so you can read that. There you go. So just a quick highlight on that, which is great. FedEx being one such example, which is great. Sorry, guys, just making it cleaner. And so I do want to highlight a couple of things. So we at Spring, we have pitched, we pitch projects to them, and we've also asked them what they're looking for. So one of the benefits that we have at Spring is that when we get a project funded by a donor or a foundation, we actually can then take that project, which is already funded, and we can go to corporates and we can say, here's a project we're going to do. We think it's aligned with what you're doing. What do you think? And then we can add them on top of the foundation. And so I think it's a really effective way, and we at Spring anyways especially find this to be true when we're talking about law firms, accounting firms, banks, financial institutions, sometimes even universities will come in and support. And so this is why having regular communication with sponsors and donors is really important, because if we know a project is aligned and we have a foundation or a donor come in first, then we know exactly which sponsors to call. The second thing is, again, human nature is that people often don't like to do things alone, right? We like to be in community. It's a village, right? It's a community of support, right? People like to be in their community, in their village, in their town, and so in this village that is, the innovation and entrepreneurship community, if we can say to them that somebody else has already stepped up and is funding, then they're more willing to add to the budget. So I'm just going to tap into this chat. And sharing from Brack, thank you. Funded by your parent company. Fundraising is not something that was a key focus for us previously, but this session conversation has been super useful. Thank you. I do think, and you're welcome, Vishnu. For Brack, the benefit that you have is you actually have the ability to look beyond the tactical and move into strategic, right? If you have the ability to supplement and complement the funding that you're getting from your parent company, it actually allows you to do more, and it allows you to achieve more and potentially impact more. And so my encouragement to you would be, yes, please do start looking at additional sources of income that you can go for. I do want to touch on a few more comments just as we wrap this. Just touching on these slides, which you guys will have access to. We have found with corporate sponsors, in particular, there's a few special considerations. One is corporate sponsors love to stand in front of a crowd. They really love to be able to step in front of people in an audience and say, hi, we're a corporation, right? And we believe in what this organization is doing. They love to do that. We definitely find that corporates love to sponsor projects, not ongoing activities. So it's a specific project with a specific mandate and moving forward. Tamana, thanks for jumping in and being a part of this. And then the last piece that I want to highlight here is they love giving their staff exposure and professional development in a program. So those were the key things I wanted to add. As we have hit on the end of this session, I do want to touch on a couple of things. Our next session is on, I believe, March 11th. And that session is going to be on the topic of corporate innovation and how we can add corporate innovation to our financial sustainability mix. It is not for all of us, but it definitely is for some of us. And I think it's something that's worth evaluating and exploring. It also happens to be the hottest funding and financial sustainability trend globally right now. The second thing is we do have regularly scheduled mentoring seminars, and the next one will be on March 18th. So just make sure that you have those in your calendar. You guys probably have already been invited to them and they should be in your calendar already, but I just want to highlight those. Liv from TDI will be leading the corporate innovation webinar on March 11th, and really excited to have her on that. And then as always, of course, do raise your questions and asks in Slack. So I'm just going to see. I personally have about 10 more minutes of extra time. If anybody has anything extra that you would like to add or ask, if you want to come off of mute now, please do, or you can type it into chat. So any last minute questions or comments about the process of fundraising and financial sustainability, or about sponsorship? Fantastic. All right, I am then going to do a stop share on this. So I just want to thank everybody for spending the last 90 minutes with me. Great. Really appreciate you taking the time. And Min, so everybody, just want to highlight, Min is going to be taking time to talk to a potential sponsor tomorrow. So Min, best of luck. Enjoy the conversation. My recommendation to you is start by sharing your vision, then ask, before you tell them exactly what you do, just ask them lots of questions. What are their goals? What are their objectives? Ask lots of questions, take that back to the team, and you can be wildly successful with it. So I'm really excited to hear about the outcome of that. Hit me in WhatsApp if you have any last minute questions. And really, really excited to work with all of you on an ongoing basis again. And don't hesitate to reach out in Slack or WhatsApp, and we'll talk soon. So I hope you guys have a